take a scenario where a person has been living as an orphan with an orphan mentality, and then he begins to get a glimpse of a new perspective. So as he's living with an orphan mentality, he is living as a moralist. He wants to be moral. He wants to do good things, has good values. So he is living as a rule keeper, a principle keeper. So he reads the Bible to get principles to live by, formulas that might work, lessons to be learned, wisdom to be gained, so he can use all of this kind of stuff. So he may be a churchgoer, and he may be reading books, but he'll tend to be reading the more self-help books, very practical stuff. He likes to hear preachers who preach very practically, is what he would say. It's like, tell me 5 things to do between now and next week to make my marriage better, to handle my money, to get my children obeying me, to make sure I've got success in my business, whatever. So he's pretty involved in all that. He lives a great deal of his life out of fear that if he doesn't do certain things, that there'll be a curse. If he doesn't tithe, for instance, that the curse will be upon him, or if he doesn't pray over his kids the right way, that the enemy's going to snatch them away from him, and all that kind of stuff. So he lives with all this kind of stuff, and he never has a sense that I can lay down in peace. At the end of the day, there's still stuff left to do. So he never has that total rest of being able to just rest in the Lord. Then one day, it breaks through him a little bit that God has sent Jesus to do all of that, to fulfill all the righteousness, and that he has turned all that righteousness in our behalf, and that now I can be a son and love God the Father. So there's going to be some turbulence there for a while. There's going to be some times of going back and forth. But I might put it in a story like this. I had a friend who was an orphan, lived in an orphanage, and later in life, later in his childhood, when he was a teenager, a wealthy man, good man, came and adopted him. So on the way home, he took him by his office and showed him the legal documents of his adoption, the fact that he's now a son and what he would inherit and all, his inheritance was. Takes him home and shows him his living quarters. So first of all, he takes him in the kitchen and shows him refrigerators full of food, pantries full of food, and so forth. Now previously, the boy in the orphanage, a pretty poor orphanage, was used to hiding food because he never was sure if you're going to have enough. His clothes, he would sleep with his clothes in the bed because he was afraid somebody else would get up before him and wear the clothes, because you didn't really own clothes, you just wore whatever was available. And so the man shows him all the food, takes him upstairs, shows him his room, shows him his closet with clothes of every kind in his size, shows him the big screen TV on the wall, his own computer, his own bed, and all that kind of stuff. Now, and then the man goes downstairs and says, get oriented and come downstairs on the white and we'll talk. Now you can imagine the turmoil that's going on in that boy, because he's been trained to think like an orphan. And there's some thoughts in his head about, I need to go down there and get a bunch of those chips and stuff and bring it up here and hide it. Or I need to get some of those clothes because somebody's liable to get them. And then he has to rethink, no, that's not me anymore. That's not me anymore. I don't have to think that way. And so what would be ridiculous is to give him a bunch of rules and say, okay, as a son, here is what you need to do. He's just going to have to get used to being a son. And that's part of the process of sanctification, and it's a part of our need for each other, so that, as the writer of Hebrews says, we can exhort one another day by day against the deceitfulness of sin. Well, what is the deceitfulness of sin? Well, part of it is suggesting to you that you need to take care of yourself, and you need to work more, you need to do more. And so a part of being a son is just getting oriented to this whole thing. The way Paul deals with it is in Ephesians 4, he says, put off the old man that was trained by the old mentality, and put off those behaviors like stealing and lying and cheating and all that kind of stuff. Renew your mind, and then put on the new man. And so the process of sanctification is, okay, I used to think like this, and that was a behavior that went with it. But now I think I'm a son, and I have to bring my thinking and my perspective and my behavior in line with who I am. So now I can do new behavior based on who I am. And then Paul illustrates it by using several things in life. He said, for instance, you who stole, you thieves, steal no more. Rather, work with your hand that you may have to give to him that has need. Okay, so as an orphan, you're thinking, I need this stuff to survive, so you're stealing, you're getting whatever you can. But once you realize you're a son, it's like, you know what, I've got all my provision, my father's present, and he owns everything, so I got all provision, so I don't have to work to get stuff, I work to give it away. So I can't wait to get up in the morning and see if I can't work a little bit more, find some other stuff, so there may be some people around who need me to give, and I get such a joy out of giving. So what Paul is showing you is once you start thinking like a son, your behavior changes without anybody giving you any rules. The fear of the legalist is that without the rules, without the boundaries and whatever, we'll just run off and do stupid stuff and ruin our lives and disgrace God and all that kind of stuff. Legalism is it's a religion that will work without the presence of God. You see, so if you're not conscious of the presence of God, obviously you're going to think that. Because if there's no rules, then what are you to do? But if you bring in the relationship, the fellowship, the presence of God, then you don't need the rules. They're still there. I mean, if you do stupid things, there are consequences. But let me just feature that just for a second there. Legalism is a religion developed by the mindset that does not take in consideration the presence of God. It'll work whether you have God or not. But it doesn't work. And all legalists eventually have to admit it. It's not working. So eventually what we have to do is we have to reduce the laws down. It's like, well, he didn't really mean that we do this. We keep dropping the standard until we can do it. And then we call that holiness. But it doesn't satisfy, and we die wondering, did I do enough? When I get there, will it be enough? And that's a terrible way to live, a terrible way to die. And what we're saying is that the gospel says that the internal change of knowing God the Father and enjoying God the Father changes you from the inside so that you not only keep the standard, but you keep the standard without being conscious of the standard. Because a man who's loving his neighbor is not conscious of the fact that he shouldn't be killing his neighbor. It never crosses his mind. And so that's why the living of a grace person is so much higher than the living of a legal person, because he's not conscious of the boundaries, though he's living in them. Legalists would be like football players who think that the goal of the game is keeping the rules. No, the goal of the game is to win the game, to play the game, to enjoy the game, to do the competition. There are some boundaries, and there's some referees out there. They'll blow the whistle if you do that. But you don't live your life based on, do I know the rules? Nobody ever made it into the Hall of Fame because they were a good rule keeper. You make it in the Hall of Fame because you're a good game player. And that's what God has done for us in the gospel. He has said, I want to free you to play the game. And another thing, if you want to set a standard to judge yourself, to say, how well am I doing? Set this one. Jesus said 3 times in the last discourse, John 14, 15, 16, 17, I'm saying these things to you, I've done these things for you, I'm praying for you for this purpose, that your joy might be full and that my joy might be in you. So if you want to use a standard to judge yourself, check your joy level. And I want to tell you something, legalists don't have a joy level. So if you're not enjoying God as much as God enjoys himself, then you're below the standard. That's what Jesus brought to us. That's what he said to the disciples in that text. He said, hey, I'm going back to the Father now, and I'm going to fix it so you guys can have the same relationship with the Father that I've had and I've demonstrated for you down here. And when that happens, your joy is going to be like my joy. My joy is going to be in you. And you'll have a joy level that's equal to mine. Well, try that living up to rules. No joy level. Some people do equate grace with just forgiveness. You know, thank God I'm forgiven. I get to go to heaven now. My sins, I won't have to face my sins at the great judgment. So thank God for grace. But now I'm kind of left on my own to do the best I can from here on. But grace, the grace of God is God not only forgiving our sin, but cleansing us. The cleansing of regeneration, the empowering of the Spirit. Because to have your sins forgiven is to become a son of God and to become a recipient of the Holy Spirit who makes us alive in the Spirit. As he does that, he enables us to desire like he desires, and to choose like he chooses, and to act like he acts. So there is no separation of, well, grace is about my sins and getting them taken care of, but now I've got to work on the rest. No, grace is about a life lived in the Spirit, conscious of the Father, doing things for the Father, knowing that inside of me, connected with my spirit, excuse me, is the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. Well, that gives me great hope. It gives me hope for transformation. It means that if I have lust or appetites that have been built in and practiced and whatever, if that same Spirit can raise Jesus from the dead, it can break that in me. It can change a sexual orientation. It can change a perversion. Because there's nothing limited by the Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. I tell people often there's nothing wrong with any of us that dying and being resurrected wouldn't fix. You say, well, yeah, I had a terrible family life and I was abused. That's terrible. I'm not downplaying that. And it does affect us. We've all been affected by the fall and many other things. But here's the good news. The solution is greater than the problem. Whatever is wrong with me is fixed by dying and being resurrected by the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. Now, what about living with a consciousness of that living inside of me is the same Spirit? If that's the case, then when I see hard jobs ahead of me or commands ahead of me, instead of despairing and going, oh, no, I can't do that, it's like, yay, I get to attack this knowing that the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is in me, and he will attack it through me, and so I get to partner with him. And that's a fun life. That's adventurous living. So Paul tells us in Romans 8 that the solution to living by the law, which is what I know ought to do, I don't do, and what I shouldn't be doing is the things I do, all that kind of stuff. So what's the solution? He said, the solution is life in the Spirit. So if we walk in the Spirit, we have liberty. So what's walk in the Spirit mean? Well, in that context, what Paul is saying is the Jewish mindset has been walking in the flesh. That is, living by the law, depending on your performance and depending on your bloodline, depending on the law, depending on the fact that you're related to Abraham, that all of that is what he calls flesh. But the Spirit is having a new mindset of realizing Jesus came as the last Adam, as the ultimate Israelite. He died and fulfilled the purposes of both of those, and now he's given us his Spirit. So that to walk in the Spirit now is to keep my mind focused on the fact that I am not a sinner in chains. I'm a son adopted into the family. I'm not looking to my penalty in the future. I'm looking to my justification because I already have been justified in him. And I have been given the same Spirit of Christ in me. Therefore, whatever I face, it is my choice to either think of it like an orphan, thinking in the flesh, or think of it like a son, thinking in the Spirit. So if I am tempted with a homosexual temptation or stealing or cheating or whatever it is, then my first move is to choose to think like a son, instead of letting that old mindset pull me back to think, well, this is who I really am. I have these needs. I really can't control them. That's what defines me. My biological urges are what define me. My perversion is what defines me. My rejection is what defines me. Yeah, that's going to be pulling. I mean, that's a battle. But I now have the privilege to stop right there and go, wait, what defines me? What defines me is what God says of me. And God says He has forgiven my sin, and God says He's given a spirit in me that is able to love love others and love God instead of love me. And so instead of satisfying my own desires right now, I have the ability to channel that so that I'm blessing God and blessing others. So yes, it's a battle. It goes back to the Ephesians 4 that I talked about earlier. You have to acknowledge that the bad behavior is bad. That's old clothes. It does not fit me anymore. But the important thing is the renewed mind. I have to come to think as a spirit person, as a person conscious of the presence of the Lord. And then I can choose the behavior. And I want to go back to the fact that it really is the relationship. It is the presence that makes the deal. If we're talking about just being transformed by willpower and just saying, I'm not going to do that and I am going to do that, and we're talking about the kind of accountability that's basically sin management. I have to report to you every day and tell you what I'm doing, and you got to, and my fear of you knowing is going to, none of that's going to ultimately transform you. The thing that transforms you is that you have a new love in your life greater than the love that's been producing the perversion. Because that is selfish love. We can get into all the reasons that we have it. Why do certain people tempted one way and some another? I don't know all the reasons. I just know the solution is the same. And the solution is that because of Jesus, I can be conscious of the presence of a Father who loves me unconditionally. And in that presence, all of that self-love and that perverted self-love that's got a hook in it is overcome by His love for me. It is true that sometimes when you're in the middle of a temptation, you can declare, the kingdom of heaven's here, like Jesus told His disciple, Lord, help me. And there's a consciousness that He's really there and He overcomes. There are other times when it's like you have to face the temptation and you actually feel all alone. You feel like, okay, where'd you go? And I think the reason the Lord does that, this is speculation on my part, but I think the reason the Lord does that is He doesn't want me to make an idol of that feeling or of that situation. Because He said, I will be with you. And whether I feel like it or not, He's there. And He's just as powerful in the moment when I don't feel His comfort, His presence, His empowering, as when He's not. It feels like He's abandoned me. But why is He doing that? He's teaching me not to live by bread alone, by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And so we can't get into I've got to have the right warm feeling or I've got to have the right circumstances. No, He's there the whole time. And He said, I will be working in you to will and do of my good pleasure. And so there have been times for me when I've had to say, God, it feels to me like you've moved to Kansas and did not leave a forwarding address. It feels like you're pretty much fed up with me and you're not going to help me. It feels like that. But you said you'd be with me. So even though I can't find you, I'm going to trust you're here. And I'm making this choice. What do you do when you fail? What do you do when you've given into temptation and you've lost the battle on that whole deal? Well, I'll tell you what you don't do first. What you don't do is go back and try to earn it. Or, well, first of all, you don't deny it. no use in saying, well, it wasn't my fault, whatever. That's the first thing. And you don't blame somebody else. That's the second thing. And you don't go back and try to earn it, which is the default mode. Okay, I'll make up for it. And one of the ways we make up for it is by raising the standard. Okay, I yielded to that temptation. It's probably because I was watching too much television, so I'm throwing the television out the door. Well, then you got to go buy another television. So we raise the standard. But what we do is we confess. To confess means to agree with God. Well, what does God say about it? Well, God says, obviously, you've made a wrong choice. So I agree with him. That was a wrong choice. He also says, I knew about that before I ever chose you. And my son paid for it on the cross. And it's paid for. And I'm interested right now in our relationship. So I have to agree with that. And it may be one of those occasions where you don't feel forgiven and you don't feel warm and whatever. But it's our responsibility to agree with God. I agree with you. My sin is paid for. And I choose now to focus on your presence. The enemy will come in and say, because you've sinned, God's left you. He hasn't. He left Jesus when Jesus took your sins, so he would never have to leave you when you sinned. So even though you feel guilty and shame and you want to go hide behind a bush, he didn't leave. And so the hard choice, the humble choice there is to say, I don't deserve this, but thank you for loving me and thank you for giving me, and let's get on with the conversation. Bottom line is, what is the goal of life? Why did God create us? Where are we going? The goal of life is, I'd say it like this, to enjoy God as much as God enjoys himself, and to display God as his physical representations on the earth, to bear his image. So that's our goal. If that goal is my goal, if I adopt that as my goal, it determines all my decisions. I don't have to worry about laws and rules and all that. They're there, they're good. I don't have to worry about it, because all decisions are measured by this. Is this helping me reach my goal? Is this helping me to know God better? Is it helping me to display him clearer? Is it building our intimacy? Is it helping me discover what he's put within me and what he's put before me? If it's not, then it's a negative. It's a no. So the goal of life is to know God and enjoy him. I mean, I think one of the creeds said something like that, doesn't it? I mean, it's not like we're the first ones to figure this out. It's to enjoy God as much as he enjoys himself, and to display him accurately in the world.